I've often thought about making a layered sculpture where different parts of an image are cut out and placed next to each other, and the image is only possible to see from a certain perspective. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do today in Blender. I'm going to start with this cropped square photo, and I'm going to turn it into this sculpture right here. This is what our nodes will look like. Thanks, patrons. Part 1 of this video is showing you how to model this sculpture, and part 2 is going to be the actual image processing. So if you want to skip to that, I'll have the link in the timeline there. So we're going to start off with a bit of modeling. I'm going to hit N to bring up this shelf on the right. And I'm just going to use these numbers here, the dimensions. I'm going to go 1.24, 1.24, and 0.0815 for my dimensions on my base there. And then if I hit 1, I can look at it from the side. I'm just going to move it up a little bit so it's basically sitting right on that red line. I was control snapping it. It looks like it's not right there. You know, you can be exact as you want. That looks great. I'm not going to worry about it too much. Alternatively, I could go up to Z for this location and go 0.0815 divided by 2. That would have been a smarter way to do it. Now it's exactly on that red line. I'm also going to hit Control A and apply that scale so that all these numbers are 1. I'm going to put this into a collection that I'm just going to call Sculpture. And I did that by selecting that and then hitting M. And so I'll call this Sculpture. Now we can see in the top right, you know, there's my scene collection with my camera and light. And then my cube is just basically the base in this sculpture here. I'm going to put a modifier on there. I'm going to put a bevel modifier, and the amount is going to be 0.005, and the segments are going to be 3. I'm going to hit Shift A and bring in a plane. And instead of being 2 by 2, I'm going to change these both to 1, so it's 1 by 1. I'm going to hit 1 to go into side view, hit G and then Z to constrain it to the Z axis. If I hold down Control, it's going to snap to each point here. I'm going to snap it to this point here. Just right at this line, basically 2 units off of that red line. And I'm going to create 3 more with Shift D and moving it up and snapping it to these places here. You can see there's the second one. You can't really see it when it's from this side, but it's just easier to see if you're in the correct spot. So I'm just going to create 4 of these in total. I'm going to grab them all and move them into a new collection. I'm just going to call this Images. Also make sure that you apply the scale on these 4 planes. If you see that these numbers aren't all 1, it's just a good practice to do. That way your bevels or scaling or whatever texturing will apply uniformly. So make sure these are all 1, then we can proceed. I'm going to duplicate this bottom plane and just leave it in place, and I'll move this into the sculpture here. And in fact, why don't we rename some of these? This first cube is going to be my base, and this one is going to be glass panes, I guess. On this glass panes, we're going to add a solidify modifier. And we're going to change this to 0.001 and just leave the offset as it is. And I'm just going to do this just kind of eyeballing it here. I'm going to move the glass panes slightly down, just barely down. You can see it's at 0.02. In fact, you could just go like this, 0.0199, something like that. In fact, that's a bit too much. Let's go 99. It's a bit better. Now I'm going to put an array modifier on there and change this information here. We're going to go 0 for the factor on X, and we'll just go 100 for the factor on Z, and I'm going to put this count to 4. Now they should be perfectly arrayed there, just underneath each of those images that I set up before. I'm going to hit Shift A and bring in a cube, and if we go to the dimensions, I think it's easiest just to type it in there. So 1.01 by 1.01 by 0.008. Let's go into side view with 1 on the number pad, and I'm just going to hit G and then Z and hold down Control, and we can snap it into place. This is probably going to be okay. We can move it up and down fairly easily, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. I'm going to hit Tab and go into Edit mode, hit 3 to go into Face Selection, grab the bottom and top faces there, and I'm going to hit I to inset the faces. And this is something we can change as well, so don't worry about it. This is not a final decision we're making here, but we're just going to inset this a certain amount. Something like this looks good, and then hit X and delete those faces. Let's make it so we can't see these images for a second, or these glass panes, and tab back into edit mode. Let's zoom in on one of the edges here. Go into edge select with 2 and grab one of these edges. I guess I can't really zoom in any further anyways, so this might be a little tricky, but basically we want to select that edge there and this edge there, hit F, and then we can grab this edge right here, hit F, and it'll fill in that face, hit F again, it'll fill in that face, and hit F a final time, and it'll fill in that final face. And then let's add a bevel modifier and an array modifier. I'm going to hit Shift A to apply my scale on that object. And for the bevel modifier, let's set the amount at 0.001 and the segments at 3. And for the count on the array, we'll go 4, but 0 for the factor x, and for the z, we'll go 12.5. Let's label this part here. I'm going to call it metal frames, and I'm just going to drop it into my sculpture collection there. We can unhide our other things here just to kind of make sure we're lining things up. A lot of this is kind of your own choice, how you set this up. It's looking pretty good to me so far. I'm going to hit Shift A and bring in a cylinder now. And let's set the dimensions at 0.01, 0.01, and 0.453, around there. That'll be fine. I'm going to go into top view with 7, tab into edit mode. Make sure I've got everything selected with A. I like to double click A and then hit A one more time to make sure I've got everything selected. I'm just going to hit G and grab it and snap it into place over here. I did that by holding down Control, but you can also hit Control or hold Control and Shift for more exact snapping. But basically, I just don't want it lopsided. I want it in the middle there. And the reason I did that in edit mode is because it kept my origin point in the middle there. So now I can add a mirror modifier. And let's do it on X and Y. So we've got 4 pieces there. And I'm just going to line it up on the side as well. It's very easy to adjust this, so I'm just going to place it there for now. And this was the way I decided to do it. I could also do it with rotational symmetry, but basically I applied this mirror modifier, and I'm just going to select this guy here with L. Same with this guy here. Just hover over and hit L. And I'm going to delete the vertices on both of those there. I could also go like this here, select everything, and hit P and separate by loose parts. So now these are 2 separate things. It's really up to you how you want to manage these, but now I've got these 2 pieces there. I'm also going to shade smooth with W or right click here on these 2 pieces. And let's call these leg 1 and leg 2 and put them in the sculpture selection there. Sculpture collection, rather. Making adjustments to these legs is fairly easy. If I wanted to move them in and out, I can grab them both, hit S and Shift Z, and that's going to move them in and out, but it's also going to adjust the diameter slightly as well. So let's say I wanted to just adjust the diameter to make up for that. I can grab them both, hit Tab to go into edit mode, just make sure they're both selected. And I'm going to go up to the top and change this to individual origins. And then I can hit S and Shift Z. And now it's just going to adjust the radius there without moving them around. I'm going to grab our base there and go into top view, tab into edit mode, face select with 3, and then grab this top face. And maybe you'll go into wireframe as well. I think that'll be easier. And I'm going to hit I to inset. And I'm basically going to go somewhere around this area here. This is basically going to be where my backlight is coming from. So I'm just going to put it kind of in the middle of those metal frames for now. I guess they're not metal yet, but those are my frames. And this looks good. Then I'm going to hit E and extrude it along the Z axis by hitting Z. Just some distance in. Something like this looks fine. And then tap back into object mode and go into solid view. I noticed I forgot to apply the scale on these stands here as well, the legs. So let's do that. Control A, apply that scale. If you decide after the fact you want to adjust this base, just go into face select, hold down Alt, and select right at this seam between the faces here. And you'll select all these faces at once. Then hit S, Shift Z, and you can move that in and out very easily. I'm going to click on my base as well and shade smooth with that context menu. You might notice some weird shading stuff when you do that. To fix that, just go down to the object data properties, go to it's somewhere in here, I think geometry, normals, and this auto smooth right here usually fixes any issues that happen there. It still does look a little weird, but that's fine. It looks fine in rendered mode, so I'm just going to leave it there. It looks like it does help with some shading with the legs though, so I'm going to turn auto smooth on for those guys. I'm going to add some materials here, and up until this point I've been using Eevee. You can use Eevee or Cycles, both are perfectly fine, but Cycles is going to give you, I think, much better color combinations, or at least I know how to achieve better combinations in Cycles than I do in Eevee. But I'll show you how to set it up in Eevee anyways at first. So go to the render settings, screen space reflections. This is important for any glass stuff. And then go to refraction and just click that on. And then let's go to our glass panes here. In fact, let's turn off the images for now so we can see if this is going to be working as well, because otherwise those are going to block the glass from showing. So I've got my glass panes selected here. Let's put a simple principled BSDF here. We'll just call this glass. And I'm going to scroll down and turn transmission to 1. Then if we come down here to blend mode, let's change it to alpha blend. And then on the bottom, just click this where it says screen space reflection. And now we've got some glass in those glass panes there. Let's click on the base here and let's add another material. I guess actually there's already a material because this is our default cube right here. So I'm just going to call this dark wood. And all I'm going to do is just grab this slider here with my mouse wheel and scroll all the way down. I'll just leave the roughness as is, that's fine. For this material here, we're going to do metal frames and these legs as the same one. So we'll just call this dark metal. And I'm going to do something pretty similar, just drag this all the way down, but I'm going to drag the metal all the way to the right as well. And let's put that on these stands as well, the dark metal. Let's go back to the base and make this backlight. I'm going to go into edit mode and face selection with 3 and just select this face right here. We're going to add a new material by clicking this plus here and just click new. And we'll call this backlight. Then let's scroll down to emission. Let's change this to white. And I'm going to change the emission strength to 5. And it hasn't done anything yet because we haven't applied this yet. So just make sure you hit assign. And it'll assign that material to that backlight. To add a little bit of ornamentation on the edge here, why don't I tab into edit mode on this base and hit Control R to create some edge loops. And let's go like this to make 2. And I can hit Control B to bevel these slightly. Let's move them down a little bit just by hitting E to extrude down on the Z axis. And then maybe let's grab in face select, I'll grab these faces here, move these slightly up. Maybe move these slightly down. Yeah, something like this looks a little bit more interesting. You know, do this as many times as you want to create whatever you're going for. Maybe I'll go like this here, move this slightly down as well. I'm going to switch over to cycles, but feel free to continue in EV if you want. It's just not going to be as good color combinations in my opinion, but maybe you know how to achieve those better than I do. So I'm going to switch to cycles. I'm going to switch to GPU as well, because that's going to help me go faster. It's not necessary if you don't have access to that, but it probably will help things go along a little better. So I'm going to add in a sky texture as well. Let's just put that on there. And let's turn the strength way down. This is going to be at like 0.01. And then basically the elevation or rotation, I kind of played around with that a little bit. Just find something that looks kind of cool. You know, it's kind of up to you how you want to do this. And in fact, I'm going to turn this down even more. Let's go like 0.05, something like that. Maybe even lower in the future, but this is looking a little bit better for now. And I'm going to do this little trick. I could go to ray visibility and just turn off camera, but I saw in another video I was watching, another tutorial. Unfortunately, I can't remember what it was, but the guy used, not here, but if we go, we're in the shader editor right now. I guess I should slow down a little bit. So I'm going to go to the world properties here. Is that world properties? The world setting here. And we've got our sky texture and background. And I'm going to duplicate this background and change this to black. And then let's mix those together. Basically, hold down Control Shift, right click and drag from one to the other. Creates this mix shader. And I think it's like the camera data. No, hold on. I'm going to find this. The node I'm thinking of is light path. So I'm going to hit Shift A and just search for that. And then I can plug is camera ray into the factor. And then we can't see it in the background anymore, but we can still adjust the strength right here if we want. I'm going to go back to object and let's adjust our glass actually because it's looking pretty rough. And just turn the roughness down to 0. I went on Unsplash and found this photo by photographer YS. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that name right. And what appealed to me is it's got a lot of background that's quite contrasting to my focal image here. So a lot of white over dark or dark over white would work fine for what I'm doing here. I then brought this into an empty Blender file by hitting Shift A, going Images as Planes, and finding that file. Once it's in here, I'm just going to go into the front view, center it with my delete/period key, and then hit Control-Alt-0 on the number pad to get a front view here. Let's go into a rendered view as well, and I'm going to split my screen slightly to open up the shader editor because I don't want this principled BSDF on here. I really just want the color output from this material, or from this image, going right into material output there. I'm going to go to the output properties here, and let's go 1080 by 1080 to get a square here, and grab your camera, hit G and then Z twice to zoom in, and just find an appropriate place to crop this. This is basically where I cropped it before. Something like this looks great, and I can do a JPEG or PNG, it doesn't really matter. Hit F12 to get that image. You could also consider bringing in a color ramp and just placing it right here, and then you basically just crush these values a little bit to only get a certain amount of the image showing through. So I'm just going to bring in a mix RGB, place it right here, feed this in right here, and change one of these colors so we can see what it's doing. Let's change this to constant and adjust these values a little bit better. There we go. So now we could just, if we wanted, just plug this color into the white there, and now we get kind of white outline around everything. This is actually what I ended up doing. It's totally up to you how you want to process this. Just going to give a different result. So back in that other Blender file, I'm going to unhide these images here. We're going to start with this bottom image, and I'm going to select New Material, and I'm going to drag that image that we prepared right in here. So if we look at this, let's isolate it and just look at it from the top. I'm going to hit Control-T while this is selected. That's a Node Wrangler shortcut. I'm going to leave it on UV output there for now. That looks great. And then I'm going to bring in a color ramp and place it right after here. Let's switch this to constant interpolation. So this color ramp here, I'm going to have 3 flags there. I'm going to be setting it up where it's white, black, white. So let's change this bottom one to white, and we're going to leave it at the bottom. This black I'm going to set at 0.04 or something pretty close. And this white I'm going to set at 0.125. So let's just look at this here. The original image, basically we are picking up a lot of the lighter spots, and a lot of the darker spots are still dark here. But a lot of the darker spots are still uncovered as well, because we don't have that very bottom part crushed there. We're going to use this color ramp to control between this principled BSDF and some transparency. So I'm going to bring in a transparent BSDF, mix these together with Control, Shift, right click and drag. Let's move this over slightly, and let's plug this in and see if it works. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Basically all that black stuff is transparent, and everything else is this white principled BSDF. I'm going to bring back everything else in my scene for a second there and just turn off these top 3 layers there. Let's look at this from the top. So it looks pretty good. Last thing I'm going to do is affect the transmission of this principled BSDF just by turning this transmission up to 1. And now we can see it's pretty see-through. We could change this color if we want. Any color we choose, something stylistic. I also found it looked pretty cool just doing this color output from that original deer picture. Then we get a little bit more color variation. It would be harder to construct in real life, but it does look pretty cool. So this is what I decided to do for my final project there. I'm going to bring back those other 3 planes and apply the same material to them as well. The material was just called material, so let's rename it right after we do this. Call this deer image. And I'll just go 001 so that it renames them easily. So if we hover around, we can see it's the same image 4 times. It does look pretty cool. I'm going to go into top view with 7 and center everything with the number pad delete key there, /period key, and then go Control-Alt-0 to get into a top view here, because it's going to highlight an issue we have, which is just the perspective kind of distorting stuff. We want these to be all lined up. We don't want them to be offset here, or at least I don't. So you can kind of see, for instance, these 4 lines here are the 4 outlines of the deer. We want those to be lined up. There are lots of ways we could do this. The way I'm going to choose is just by using the UV maps. That's why I decided to do UV mapping in the first place with these images here. So I'm going to go into the UV editor just by opening up another screen. And let's grab one plane at a time and just size them. And because of my viewport lag too, I'm also just going to do this in Eevee. I think it'll be much faster for me, and if it is for you, just do the same. So I've got this selected. One thing is I also need to change a setting on the material itself. So if I change one material, they're all going to change because it's the same thing. Let's go down to blend mode, and we'll change this to alpha blend. I'm going to grab this first plane here, which is the one closest to the backlight or farthest away from the camera. And I just need to tab into edit mode. Make sure I'm over the UV once I'm sizing, because if I'm here in sizing, it's going to size the physical plane. We don't want that. We just want the UV sized differently. So I'm going to zoom in on this boundary here. I'm going to make everything aligned with this plane right here. So this one's going to have to be sized down a little bit to make the image larger. There we go. Tab back into edit mode, or object mode, pardon me. Select the second plane there. Tab into edit mode. Make sure, again, we're over here. And let's size that up. Looks good. This one's going to be fine. Let's go to the last one, though. Tab into edit mode, grab it here, and we're going to size it down a little bit by sizing the UV up. There we go. And to check that you did that correctly, just hit N to get this shelf up here. And if we go to all of these different planes, these dimensions should all read 1 by 1. If those numbers are different, you've accidentally sized up the plane itself. Just a quick note as well, if you are doing this in Eevee, make sure you click screen space refraction on these materials as well, and not just on the glass panes there. So we can see much better coloring if we do that. I'm going to switch back into cycles here and continue. Let's go to the second plane, which is this one right here, the second closest to the backlight, third closest to our face, basically, if we're looking at it from this spot here. And let's make a new image, new material, I guess, so that this is 0, 0, 2 now. And if we change anything here, we're not going to be changing anything on that bottom one. We don't really need this UV editor open anymore, so I'm just going to close that up and make this a little larger for us to work. And let's change some stuff on this color ramp. This white at the top, let's move this up to 0.293. And this black, let's put this at 0.164. I'm going to grab this mapping node as well and duplicate it and plug object into this first vector here and create a second mapping node. Just put it right after that one there. And then I'm going to bring in a Voronoi node, place it right here, plug this into the vector, and let's move all this over a little bit, give us a bit more room. And I'm going to bring in a color ramp. Oops. There we go. And I'll run distance into the factor there. I'll switch these around, change this to constant, and I'll put the black at 0.45. I'm going to change the scale here to 200. And let's look at this while we're changing it around as well. I'm going to change the randomness to 0, although it would look kind of cool if the randomness was maybe at 0.1 or something like that. Try it out. And I'll change the Z rotation on this first mapping node to 35 degrees. So now I've got it tilted a little bit. And then on this second mapping node, I'm going to change the X scale, the Y scale to 3. So now we got it stretched a little bit. Then I'm going to plug this output of the color ramp into the alpha on this principled BSDF. Let's just look at that for a second here. Basically, anything that was black is going to be see-through now, and anything that's white is going to be this principled BSDF. So if we look at that here, might be a little tricky to see. I guess here we go. So yeah, we can see the transparent parts in between these circles, or ovals, I guess now, and then those are, the non-transparent parts. Let's go to the third plane there. This one's going to be the third furthest from the backlight, second closest to our eye there. And I'm going to change this to Deer Image 2 and then make a new material, Then I have to change less. So this Voronoi and color ramp are already set up for me. I'm going to change the Z rotation here to 45. And I'm going to change the X scale to 4.3 and the Y scale I'm just going to put back to 1. And then let's change something on this color ramp here. This white is going to go to 0.361, and this black is going to go to 0.127. Looking at this, I kind of like it when the Voronoi is turned up a little bit on the randomness as well. So maybe I'll put this at 0.4 for this plane, and for this one here, maybe 0.3. Something that looks pretty cool, just what I prefer. let's set up that last plane, and I'll go deer image 2 or deer image 3 and create a new material again, just to save a bit of time. And let's adjust this Z rotation to 60 this time. The X scale is going to be 2, and why don't we go 0.1 for the randomness? Doesn't really matter too much. It's just going to be slightly different output, but still going to probably look really cool. So then the color ramp here, we'll change this to 0.155 for the black, and the white we'll put at 0.334. So this already looks pretty cool, but I wanted to do one more thing. I'm going to duplicate this color ramp with Control-Shift-D so it remains attached to this image texture here. And let's just get rid of this white at the bottom. And I'm going to swap these around. So we'll put the white at the bottom, leave the black at the top. The black is going to be at 0.041. Let's look at that output. It's going to be mostly masking out the very dark here is now white, and the whiter parts are all black. I'm going to create a second mix shader here and just put it right behind, oops, not right there, right here, and run this into shader 1. And I'm going to copy this principled BSDF. Let's turn this to black, and I'm going to run this into the bottom. We also want to make sure transmission as it is at 0 on this one. And then I'm going to run this color ramp into the factor here, and let's look at this. Now we've got kind of a cutout at the top that's just showing where that deer is, and there's a lot of spots like right here where it's completely opaque, just where the really dark spots are. So I thought this was kind of cool. Creates a filter at the end. Let's try one more thing as well. This is how I had my final setup. I'm going to go to the glass panes. Let's go to the array modifier and just click 5. And we'll do the same thing with the metal frames. We'll just click 5, and then let's grab these 2 stands, or legs, or whatever you want to call them. Go into wireframe, and we'll just grab these top here. I didn't go into wireframe. We'll just grab these top vertices here. Go into side view with 1. Hit G and then Z. We'll just move them up to something like this. I'm just going to zoom in so I can get a better view. Looks great. To animate the camera, I've already got a good ending position, so maybe frame 100 or 200 is good, depending on how long you want your animation to be. I did a 200 frame one, so I'm just going to go to frame 200 there, go into camera view, just to make sure I'm in my top view there, and everything's lined up with the perspective correctly there. Select your camera, hit I, and select location. Then I'm going to go into front view here, just grab this, hit 8 on the number pad, make sure everything's centered. And you know what, before I did any of this too, before you set the camera, you just need to make sure you're on the starting frame as well. So you can hit shift and left arrow to return it to the start of your timeline. And then I'm going to hit Control Alt 0 on the number pad. And I'll maybe zoom out a little bit as well. Something like this looks fine. If you're worried you're off center, just look at the X value under your transform. Just make sure it's 0. So that looks fine for me. And when you're happy with your location there, just hover over your 3D viewport, hit I, and select location. So the only issue here is, when we're going up here, it's not really looking at the object anymore. We're going to do one more thing to fix that. I'm going to hit Shift A and bring in an empty, and any of these will work fine. They just look different. So then select your camera and then your empty, and then hit F3 to search. And we're going to go constraint, I think. Lock or track to constraint. I believe that's what does it there. So now we notice our camera is facing this empty, and as the camera moves up, it's going to still face that empty there, just like this. So let's see if that's working okay. It's kind of facing the bottom there more than the top, so I'm going to move my empty up slightly so that it's more in the middle there, and this is what our camera animation is going to look like. Yeah, that looks good to me. I'm happy with that. Let's see what this looks like on Eevee as well. It's going to take a second to load in for me. Yeah, there we go. Well, it does look neat. It just doesn't quite look the same to me, and I'm not sure how to make it look as good in Eevee. So, if you have any tips, leave me a comment, let me know. But for whatever reason, it just looks a lot better in Cycles. quick tip for rendering this out as well, under the render properties, I would turn this max samples down quite a bit, maybe to like 128 or 256, something like that. And make sure you have denoise checked. I think it's checked as a default now, but if you don't have this checked, then the glass is going to be really noisy, and it won't look as good. So just check this, and if your samples are too low, it's going to kind of look blurry. So if it's too blurry, just bump this up to maybe 256 or something like that. But the number they have at first, the 4096, takes a long time to render, so I wouldn't recommend doing it on those settings. I'm going to clip the end of my timeline to 200 so we don't go past that last frame. And then if you select this output here, select a path right here, and just render it out as a render sequence, or image sequence, either PNG or JPEG. So find a path and then hit Control F12, and it'll render out as a sequence. So one last thing I did as well, instead of just having this point light sitting up there the whole time, I had a little animation where, after the end, where it kind of showed this top part here, the light just kind of skirted by on the top and just lit up the frame slightly. So I'll show you how I did that. First of all, I turned this power down to -40, and I'm just going to change the location here to -10, maybe 2.6 and 2.5, something like this here. And I'll go to frame 201, and let's set the location right there. Then frame 260, I'll set +10 and catch that location as well. Everything else is going to be the same though. And with these two keyframes selected, I'm going to hover over my timeline, hit V, and then select vector. And that's going to make it so that it's just a straight vector line rather than kind of a curved animation where it goes slow and then fast and then slow at the end there. And then I'll set the end to 260, and let's just see what that looks like if I start this at 200. Yeah, it looks good. I could speed it up or slow it down if I wanted, but this is fine. So then all I did is I, set it back to 1, and I rendered out the whole animation. And then basically you can just take the first 200 frames and reverse that animation and get, where it goes back down here. After looking at some of my renders, I kind of prefer this base to be as plain as possible, because I'm kind of thinking it takes some attention away from the main detail, which is all this stuff here. So to reset all this here, I'm just going to grab these faces, and let's go up to the top, and instead of snap to increment, we'll go snap to vertex. And then I can hit GZ and hold down Control and grab one of these vertices here, because this is something we never really moved around in the first place. I'm going to do the same thing to this here, grab those, and then I'm going to need to just grab these little bevel insets as well, which might be a little tricky to do. There we go, GZ, grab it there, GZ, grab it there. And then I'll just grab these edges and just kind of get rid of these as well. Dissolve edges. I'm going to need to do that one more time because there was a bevel there. There we go. It's like it never even happened. Okay, that's it for today. Hope you could see what I was doing and how you could change it around. This project has a huge potential for creativity. I think, you can do so many changes, create so many things, use way more layers, use different colors, different refractive indices for the glass. You could do colors for the backlights, colors for the glass, so many things you could change around. So if you do make anything with this project template, please share it on my Discord or Instagram. I'd really love to see it. Thanks for watching.